Hi there and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's APMG webinar. We're on unusual times right now, but I'm delighted that we're in an age where we can still communicate and broadcast, and you can watch and listen to these webinars freely, in spite of the fact that many of us aren't able to join physically at this time. Usually you'll be used to our regular moderator, Mark, who I missed desperately today, and you'll have seen I opened the doors early, so you might have had a little sneak preview of Mel's slides there. I'm Estelle Hicks-Bennett. I'll be your host and moderator today, which is a first for me. No small feat, as I'm joined by regular guest, Melanie Franklin. So I'm hoping we can use all our change and agile skills today to power through this webinar smoothly. I'm sure we have a few attendees from previous webinars delivered by Melanie who'll be familiar with her background, but for the benefit of those that aren't, Melanie's an experienced practitioner, trainer and consultant in all things Agile, project, program and change management. So today's webinar is particularly relevant as Melanie gives us some practical advice for reducing resistance to Agile methods. She'll address some of the challenges that can be put forward by those resisting change and share some examples as to how she herself has overcome these. She'll also explain how she gains support from all levels within organisations for a move towards agile and adaptive practices. Before I hand things over to Melanie, bear with me whilst I cover a little housekeeping. This session is recorded and everyone that's registered will receive a follow-up email with the recording and slides very soon. Please do ask questions throughout the webinar using the control panel, which you should be able to see on your computer. This option is not available on handheld devices. Do take part in the poll questions as it helps Melanie adapt the content to make it as relevant as possible throughout the webinar. And finally, we welcome your feedback, positive or otherwise, as it helps us to deliver the content that's most valuable to you in the future. So please do get in touch via the questions panel or through the contacts included in the follow-up email. Okay, Melanie, welcome. Over to you.
That's lovely, Estelle, and that's brilliant. I know it's your first one, but that's what change is all about, learning new skills. So you're bigging up your competency in webinars, so that's brilliant. We're going to have a fast and furious webinar today. It's all about Agile, and if you were able to see my slides as you logged on this morning, you can see that I'm Agile because I was adding to them and amending them as we went. So it's all about adding the learning as we go. I'm going to look at the different perspectives that parts of the organization have on Agile, and the key thing is we're going to be talking about bringing everybody with us. So there's quite a few tips and techniques in here for selling the benefits of Agile, but particularly I'm going to be looking at the evolving solution and what that means for different parts of the organization, and why perhaps sometimes the wonderful word of Agile is not seen as beneficial by everybody. So we have a little bit of work to do. This presentation is based on a speech that I gave only a month ago to the Agnostic Agile group. It's a meetup group in central London. And that was the last time I really did anything face to face. I remember that night we didn't shake hands, we just touched feet as tapped our shoes to each other to acknowledge hi to everybody. But that was the last time that I did a sort of real face to face. So it's nice to be back online. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tailor my remarks to whoever I've got on my audience. So Estelle is going to run two polls. Number one is what role, and number two, what qualifications. So over to Estelle to run the first poll, please, to get to know the audience. So just tick one of those options so that I can just get a feel for maybe what your perspective is, because that'll help me in delivering the content for this webinar.
Okay, I think they're nearly in, Mel. We're getting there. There's a couple of
Right.
changes. Okay, we've got 19% change manager. Don't forget these won't add up to 100% because there's a few there. 19% change manager, no developers, nearly 50% project program managers, 15% business operational role. So that's people that are sort of involved there, and 20% other.
Well, okay, welcome to the 20% other. But that gives me a really good understanding. That's great. And just so I know what you've studied in the past, just kind of have a quick poll coming up on qualifications, which Estelle's going to run, and then we'll get cracking.
Okay, 56% yes, 44% no.
Yes to what question?
Sorry, do you have an Agile qualification? Sorry, can you not see that, Mel? I
I can't
apologise.
see the polls at all as a presenter.
Ah,
It's
sorry.
one of the little
Okay, there you go.
downsides of this lovely system.
Okay,
Okay,
apologies.
so over half of you have got an Agile qualification. Okay, so I've got, half and half. Okay, I can work with that. Right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the different perspectives that we have and who's involved in the world of Agile. Now, when I talk about Agile, I am not talking about just IT projects. I'm talking about any initiative where what we're trying to do is we're trying to do a little bit, get into operational use as soon as we can, so that we get a return on investment as soon as we can. But we're also leaving ourselves open to further developing our ideas and putting the most useful next thing into use, and then the next thing after that. So I'm not going to get caught up into any specific Agile methodology this morning. As you might have seen on the intro slide, I seem to have them all from the Scrum Alliance, from the Scaled Agile Framework family, Large Scale Scrum, the Agile Business Consortium's Agile PM. I'm also the chief examiner for the Agile Change Agent course, which is running away with itself in terms of enthusiasm around the world for people learning the combination of both change management and Agile approaches. So there's plenty of learning out there. What I'm going to try and do is sort of skim over all of that and look at the impact of Agile. And this first slide comes from the Agile survey that the CollabNet do every year. They've been doing it now for 13 years. The next one's due out in about a month's time. So bookmark the 7th of May and look for the State of Agile. If you just do State of Agile survey in Google, you'll see it come up. I will be pushing it out via LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with me, connect with me after this webinar and you'll make sure that you'll get up-to-date resources. But what's so useful about this is that it's a year-on-year survey of all sorts of things about what's happening in the Agile world, from the tools and techniques we're using, the benefits we're seeing from it. And this is the benefits slide, which frankly has remained pretty stable over the last few years. Over 2/3 of the audience think that Agile's greatest benefit is the ability to manage changing priorities, which I totally agree with, but they also think it gives them greater project visibility, more upfront about what's going on, and also greater alignment between business and IT. And these are the sorts of things that these are really good things. Agile is great. I think Agile is a very common sense approach to the fact that we're in a world of unending volatility. And I'm not going to dwell on the crisis that we're all in at the moment, because I'm sure you're all sick of hearing about it. But I do think that Agile makes sense when you find it very hard to predict what's coming up in the future, doing a little bit and then reflecting on where we are and then doing something else after that makes logical common sense. So there are a huge number of benefits to Agile. However, the people I'm concerned about aren't the ones that are necessarily working in projects and initiatives, but they are in the business. And apparently we've got 15% of you on the call at the moment, but people who have a day job, people who perhaps have some kind of management or supervisory role, they've got staff working for them, they've got day-to-day responsibilities to deliver, and actually Agile is not, well, in fact, project management generally is not their day job. You have to make change happen as part of your job, but you've also got the day job to do. And I think there are a number of people within the quote unquote business who feel that perhaps Agile is more problematic. One of the most constant things I get told, well, there's no plan. I just don't know where we're heading. I don't know what's going to be happening next. Where's the plan? Well, who's doing what? When are things going to happen? So there's a great deal of concern over that. There's also a perception that perhaps, well, we won't get everything we want. I do think actually in the world of Agile, probably one of the most dangerous phrases we've got is the minimum viable product or minimum usable subset, because I've never stood in a boardroom and promised my board of directors the minimum and expected them to be delighted by my work. Minimum is not great. We've also got another killer phrase in Agile: fail fast. which, I understand the concept. Yes, let's, if we're going to make mistakes, if it doesn't work, let's find out as early as possible and do something else. But the word fail is, again, not really a selling word. So sometimes we do shoot ourselves in the foot. So we sometimes create the impression we're not going to get everything that we want. There's also a lot of meetings and workshops and lots of collaboration and face-to-face. And I think sometimes, certainly a lot of the organisations I work with, there is some kind of suspicion and concern about the number of meetings that are going on. Is any work actually getting done? And of course, with very little in the progress reporting, the traditional sort of typing up a sort of blow-by-blow account of everything that we've done in the last week or month, and instead pointing to a whole load of fluttering post-it notes on a whiteboard, that can sometimes cause a degree of concern as well. So, yeah, there are obvious benefits, but there are fears as well. There are concerns. And I think that if those of us who've been using Agile methods and continue to do so and want to bring more people in and want to work with others, I think the first step on this journey is to recognise that perhaps not everybody sees the glory of Agile and is immediately tuned into the benefits, and that we need to be sensitive to that. We need to think about those concerns. We need to be empathetic. We need to walk in the shoes of others and actually see the world from their perspective, and maybe give them information that we think is so obvious we don't necessarily bother to share it. And part of this webinar is about doing that. So first of all, one of the things we need to think about is those different perspectives that I've just talked about. On the left, we have the traditional hierarchical team who are doing the day job. These are the guys that keep the lights on, that they are incentivized, they are performance managed around delivering business as usual. So the things that they are concerned about is consistency and reliability, that actually the things that they need are working. And then in fact, in that regard, change simply isn't that helpful. Let's just keep our heads down, keep going and get the job done. On the flip side, there's a lot of us who are on this call today who are in the green corner, and that it is our job, and what we are incentivized to do is to transform our businesses, to implement change, to make things different, to improve things, to innovate. So we know that we're doing good things, but of course, the thing is that maybe that interrupts the business as usual. So there are two very distinct perspectives, and I'm often sort of explaining, particularly because I set up very large sort of change agent networks, and those change managers who are responsible for that, I sort of try to remind them that the people they now need to work with might have a very different view, that actually they don't see these change initiatives as a fantastic sort of opportunity and excitement, and certainly that's not the thing that's in their minds 100% of the time. They are incentivized on a completely different set of metrics. Theirs is about getting the day job done, and for that reason, we need to be sensitive to perhaps what their concerns are. And I think that sensitivity is important, because ultimately what we need, if we are going to get anything done in an organization, is we need what Agile often refers to as the one team culture. But the whole point is that we are working together. I can't put any initiative in place unless I've got support from the business, who are ultimately going to work in the new ways, who are the most directly impacted by my change initiative, because I need them on a day-to-day basis to help me shape the deliverables that the project teams are creating, to have their say. And it's working together to do that. So I need their up-to-date understanding of the business processes to help shape project deliverables. And at the same time, if I'm going to stand a chance of realizing benefits, I need to make sure that those in the business who are going to have to work differently as a result of my project deliverables have actually had a chance to design their new ways of working and to practice and put in place those new ways of working. Otherwise, all we've got is money spent on the project deliverables, but we haven't moved things forward. So we are absolutely together in this. So what I'm really looking for is I'm looking to understand some key people within that sort of more hierarchical authority that we can work on with the team. And I need to make sure that we therefore build that integrated team, that actually we are there, even if they're not there full time, that perhaps every morning I start with maybe a scrum or a daily stand-up meeting where I invite people in, these key people from the business, so that we can ask them important questions, we can share progress, keep them up to speed, and allow them to go back to their day jobs, keeping everybody else around them up to speed on what's happening and laying the groundwork for successful delivery. So first of all, I think we always have to start with the fact that there's a recognition that perhaps we do have different jobs to perform, and we are incentivized slightly differently, and let's understand what this key audience from the business is actually motivated by and what they're responsible for, and let's see if we can work together on that basis. I think it's worth, therefore, talking about this audience and trying to understand perhaps why there is suspicion and fear about more agile approaches. And I think a lot of us have moved on from the more traditional project management approaches now. And by the way, I'm definitely not going to be the kind of person that says agile is the solution for everything. I think that with a traditional approach, we gather all of our requirements up front, and we use that understanding of the requirements to develop a plan, a step-by-step plan that we can turn into, as you can see on the screen here, a Gantt chart. And what happens is that we will go live at the end of that. And I still think that works, by the way. If you absolutely know what your requirements are, if you know exactly what it is you're going to be doing, I still think that a traditional approach sometimes can be incredibly helpful. So I'm not here to say agile good, traditional bad. But this is the picture that many people have in their minds, at least, of what a project is, that there'll be some involvement up front to identify what they need and what they want. And then effectively the project team goes away into a dark corner somewhere, does all the work, pulls it all together, and then they are handed back in the business a fully fledged solution with all the features, all the requirements delivered. It's delivered as one complete package at one point in time. And therefore they know what's coming, and they can get, there's a lead time, they can get ready for it. And I think that's the picture that we have to have in mind to understand what people are experiencing. What happens, of course, in our agile world is that we start with an idea. We go live as soon as we possibly can. This is the key to the evolving solution, is that we step by step move towards that fully fledged solution. But what we do is we get things into operational use as soon as possible. So we move through each of those go lives, getting something ready for the business, recognizing that certainly as we start work, perhaps we're putting in place things that don't have every piece of functionality that the business are used to. And I think this is a very important part. I'm doing some big enterprise-wide system rollouts at the moment. And one of the things that I keep talking about with some of my key managers in the business is a recognition that when we start turning on the organization-wide functionality, what they are losing is all of the functionality that they've built up locally. For example, if I'm putting in SAP or Salesforce, what's happening is that we might be replacing a whole load of spreadsheets and local reporting. Yes, there's great efficiencies, but of course what the business feel that's happening to them at that moment in time is loss, because they're losing local functionality. And that can be hugely problematic, because they feel that the solution they're getting instead only has part of what they need. so that they feel that they're losing out for a very long period of time, because it takes us quite a while in Agile to catch up with all of the bells and whistles that they are used to working with. We might get there after, it might be 6, 7, 8, 9 sprints. There could be several increments of multiple sprints before we actually get there. So I'm always very conscious of the fact that actually that my project deliveries are not necessarily good news for the business, because they're going, hang on, I'm getting less than I had before, and you want me to be excited about this? So just having a look at these two diagrams, again, this is often what I draw for my clients to do. It's to explain the left hand is probably what you're used to. I'm going to be moving you more towards the right hand. So again, it's just explaining how Agile works in very practical terms for people who it's not their day job, and it's not something they need to be worried about. One of the other things that I think we need to recognize is that when we go live, whether it's iterations, increments, sprints, whatever the language is, we know that we do something and then we go live as early as we can to get that early return on investment. But of course, what happens is that every time we go live, as it were, every time there's an outcome, we are triggering that change curve, because what we're saying to people is, could you stop doing things in the old way now, please? And could you start making use of this new thing now, please? And of course, what happens is there's this traditional transition curve. Whenever we start doing something new, we tend to fall down that productivity dip. And as long as we keep practicing, we can sort of crawl out the other side, put the crampons on, and sort of climb up that mountain on the right-hand side. And that happens to all of us all of the time. I might be used to working on GoToWebinar, Zoom and Teams and Skype. It's my day job. But when I became locked down here in Spain just under 3 weeks ago now, I had to move all of my workshops and planning meetings and program meetings online. And I certainly found that first Sunday, because I work Sunday through Friday, and the first Sunday in the Middle East, here I was in my home office, which I haven't really worked in very much, because actually I'm usually on site with all of my clients. So my productivity was deeply affected by things like, which table shall I use? Where's the plug socket? Where can I charge my phone? Where are my textbooks? Have I got my textbooks? Where's my notes? Have I got any stationery in the office? And all of these things, it's like wading through treacle when you have a change imposed on you. Now, if you're motivated, and clearly we all are, we keep going and we make things right, and we learn from our mistakes, and we realize that perhaps I need to have a completely separate table where I put my tea and coffee, because otherwise tipping a cup of tea into my laptop is not the most intelligent thing I could do. You learn, for example, that perhaps you're going to have to put headphones on, in my case, because otherwise, if I'm just talking into my laptop, it's not like being in my office in central London, because there I don't have 42 kilos of Labrador barking himself senseless every few minutes. So I've learnt, and I've come out the other side. And that's what happens with every change. We dig our way out of what is effectively a productivity dip to begin with, while we're going slowly because we're not sure what we're up to, and we're making mistakes and we're putting them right, and therefore we're not going as fast as we used to. And that's what happens every time we introduce change. This happens at the end of a traditional project, and it happens more frequently with Agile. I think one of the things I always try to do when I draw this diagram for my clients, particularly some of my senior leaders, is to sort of say, if I'm honest, what you're going to find is that you are quadrupling the volume of change that's happening in your organization as you move towards an Agile approach. Because if I've got a more traditional approach, so if I go back to this diagram, and you just look at it and you think, well, we go live once, maybe I've got a 9-month project, we're going to make some significant change in the business in 9 months' time, and we can gear up for that. But within the Agile approach, I might be implementing change, maybe not after every sprint, not every 2 weeks, but certainly I'm going to be putting change in place every few months. And so I'm going to triple or quadruple the number of times I effectively force my business into the learning dip. And of course, that's something that concerns senior leaders greatly, because the learning dip, the productivity dip, is stressful for staff, but it also has a depressing figure on whatever business as usual metrics that they are looking at. I mean, if we start introducing new ways of working to a call center, you might very well find that levels of customer satisfaction, the number of calls that they can take, the number of right answers they get to their customers as quickly as possible falls while they're all struggling to get to use the new system. So Agile is not just an interruption, but it can be sometimes seen as quite a dangerous interruption. So again, just being empathetic, let's keep these things in mind. I've got ways that we can overcome some of these more negative messages, but I want us to set the situation up first on this webinar so we know where we stand. And then the other thing that I am particularly concerned about is the fact that Agile is seen as sort of creating uncertainty, because often the evolving solution that I find as a program director so incredibly useful is that we can put all our effort towards a sort of short-term known deliverable, and then we can evolve the solution and we can build on that. So I don't actually know what I'm going to be delivering after that, but I've got some ideas, but there's not a great deal of certainty, and that's great. That keeps the door open. I can cope with more disruption. I can cope with current situations. So that's fantastic for me as the program director. But my chief operating officer just wants to hit me over the head with something heavy, because what he's seeing is that actually, well, you're not giving me much clarity here, Mel. You know, and frankly, how am I supposed to plan for this? In Saudi Arabia at the moment, one of the diagrams I drew most recently was the fact that with this particular picture, I said to all of those on the sort of project side, I said, this makes perfect sense to us. But I said, we've got to remember that actually for the deliverables that are going into the business, where they directly affect sort of external customer relationships, there needs to be quite a significant lead time of communication. You need to be telling customers that change is coming. And so I can't wait, and I need to be starting to tell them now. So I can't wait while you decide what that change might be. So actually there is a very pragmatic impact on some of my agile sort of planning, in that I do need to plan further ahead than I might want to, because if there's a big lead time in terms of how I get others ready for the change that's coming, clearly I'm going to have to decide what change is coming months ahead of when I would normally do so. I don't think we think enough about that in Agile. We sort of say, oh, the solution's going to evolve. You know, not everybody's happy with that. Actually, sometimes we need to prepare people much further ahead than we thought about. So that lack of clarity can often be an issue. I put on here some of the other pushbacks, some of the other resistance that I regularly experience. And one of those is that an agile sort of roadmap like this can look at never ending. And it is one of the problems that I've experienced with a number of agile teams who they get started and they work sprint by sprint by sprint. They are consistently delivering value. They are delivering new functionality out to the business each time, and that's fantastic. But it is that there's no end in sight. It's almost a continuous improvement process. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that many senior executives value the concept of a project, of the idea that there is a specific period of time which they need to fund, and then that will come to an end having made a significant contribution to new ways of working. Whereas a never-ending picture can give them a great deal of concern about how they might budget for that and what they're actually committing to in terms of financial impact, the total impact that they're committing to. So again, I think that's something that we need to reflect, and I've got an answer for that coming up. And then I think, you know, as I've said, it's that lack of clarity far enough in the future that we can actually manage sort of the customer impact. So again, it's just saying that Agile's great, but there are things that we need to think through about how others might be receiving their experience of Agile from us. And what I want to sort of start to move and look at is perhaps how we deal with that. The first is, I think, that we need a structured process for defining the evolving solution. The evolving solution is, I think we go wrong if what we do is we start to build up the evolving solution from, let's try a few features. In fact, I'm just going to go back to this earlier diagram here, the one on the right. If we build up from a picture of says, right, okay, I've got an idea, let's try this out. Oh, that's gone quite well. Let's build on that. Right, I'll put another idea. Oh, that didn't go so well. Let's not repeat that, but let's add these features and do something else. That sort of incremental agile approach, I think we need to be quite careful. I don't say that it's a bad thing. I think that it's absolutely essential that we respond to live feedback and we reflect that. Things that work, we build on. Things that don't work, we amend. But it has to be done within a wider wrapper. It has to be more strategic than tactical. I think that's where we can get some sort of clarity, much needed clarity for the business, and much needed reassurance and certainty for the business. So let's have a look at actually how we do that create the bigger wrapper, if you like. Forgive me for drinking the tea, but I've been online for 5 hours now, so my throat's starting to close. And I'm very lucky that somebody brings me a tea even halfway through a webinar. I've got a great service level agreement with my 85-year-old father, so it's going very well. I get tea every 90 minutes. Right, let's have a look. So we know where we are today, and the evolving solution, perhaps the wider context, is going, okay, what's the future going to look like? I think this is particularly interesting at the moment. I don't know about you, but I'm certainly in a number of meetings where we are hypothesizing about once this crisis is over, not only what will be the shape of our future, but also when we can return to it. And when we're debating what the shape of that future looks like, I think that I've got a number of CEOs where we're looking at the fact that perhaps we will have more of our staff in virtual online, that we won't be bringing everybody back physically to offices going forwards. And they're already starting to look ahead at perhaps they'll be releasing some of their office space, either subleasing or actually getting out of rental contracts. Also looking at perhaps the impact of presenteeism being killed off almost completely. That's probably been one of the biggest hindrances to more working from home and online working, is that managers who are nervous about not seeing their staff day to day and not seeing if they're delivering value. But I think that concept's probably going to die off. But on the flip side, perhaps one of the things we're going to recognise is the importance of society and having some kind of community at work and having some kind of physical contact and basically building relationships that a completely virtual world might not deliver. So one of my CEOs is already starting to think about how he is most likely going to be moving an awful lot of staff to virtual working, but he's also going to have to put in place sort of regular events where people all come together at the same time for several days, where there is shared working, shared understanding, and then they dissipate again. So he's already starting to think of what that new picture will be. And that's it. We work with what we know at the time. So if I cast forward into the next 6, 9, or 12 months, I know what my end goals are going to be. So I'm thinking about the capabilities that I can deliver for the organization in the wider sense. So at the moment, one of my programs is about creating a greater streamlining of processes, much greater clarity of exactly how things should be run, and being able to cost those out. At the moment, the organisation tends to sort of reinvent the wheel every time it wins a big new customer contract. And we're actually saying, no, I think there's something we could do here to further define how we work and then scale it up. So we've got an idea what the end goal is, but of course, what happens is that we start to sort of talk and realise that perhaps you know, that's not the case, and actually, just trying to see here. Hang on a sec. The animations died off. That what I need to do is I need to deliver key changes, the first wave of change to meet my current understanding of what the end goal is. But I then recognise that as a result of that, the feedback of that, and of course the wider picture, the horizon scanning that we all do to find out what's happening in our industry, in our market, what our customers want, technologically what's available to us, might reshape that end goal. So then my next wave of change is going to be more in keeping with that. And then again, exactly the same thing happens there. And you see that we get more actually happening in terms of that orange box there. So I think what I can offer with this diagram is a sense to the organisation that we've got the bigger picture in mind. So we know where the overall destination is that we're going. So if it's talking about streamlining of processes, for example, greater efficiencies, maybe greater automation, that end goal could have been under the heading of digital transformation. So there's some sort of big picture. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break my understanding of that big picture down. I'll decompose that into more specific pieces of work, and I'll deliver on some of those, the most valuable. So we're back to Moscow prioritization, the most valuable ones right now. But I will come back to you, consult with you, share the learnings, gather your feedback, and we can take a consensus decision on what we think the shape of the end goal now looks like. And therefore, again, I will decompose that and select the most valuable piece of work to deliver on that. And then we'll come back and do this again. So I think that can overcome this feeling of, well, Agile is completely unplanned. I don't know where we're going with any of this. So I think that structured approach is incredibly important. I think the next answer is perhaps what we need to do is using that idea is that I'm not sure what deliverables I am going to provide to you in the future, because I want to keep the door open. The whole point of Agile is that I can evolve the solution, and I don't know exactly all the features and functions I'm going to offer to you. But what I can perhaps say is the capabilities. Let's look at describing our work slightly differently. Let's talk about what the organisation will be able to do in the future. And I think we can look ahead and start to work out what those points actually are, that there will be new abilities, things that the organisation couldn't do before that it can do now. How the organisation does that, which system choices I make, which process and organisational choices I take. I'm leaving the door open wide on that, because I want to flex that as I go. But what I can do is break down that end goal into those known capabilities, that we will be able to do these things. We will be able to deliver to these types of customers for these types of products in these locations. So I think we can start to talk about capability, what we're able to do. And I think we should do that. I think we should be much clearer about what that future path looks like. So not deliverables. I'm not talking about outputs. I'm talking about, as a result of the work we do, this is what we're heading towards you being able to do that you couldn't do before. I'm absolutely going to be able to take some people out of this business process. We are going to be automating this process. Now, whether or not that's me putting a front end app on that, whether or not I'm actually doing some kind of robotic process automation or AI, I don't know. We're probably going to discover that as we go. But I am promising you that we can free up 15% of your staff who are currently doing a manual intervention on this process, and you can repurpose them elsewhere for more value added activities. So I think we need to be talking more in terms of business capabilities. And then that leaves the door open for us to actually work out how we might deliver on that capability. So that is talk about what we do know, and leave the door wide open for the things we don't want to sort of nail down just yet. And then one of the other things that I think is so important is that whatever work we've got in terms of our project world, we often write user stories. Here's a lovely little user story up on the screen. But whatever that is, actually, let's reflect on the fact that it is made up of two parts of the work. It's made up on very tangible project deliverables, but there's also, of course, the new ways of working. So if I go all the way back, forgive me, but here you can see that there are sort of two streams of work always. There's the actual tangible project deliverables, but I also need the business to work out what the steps in their new process are going to be, what the activities are actually going to be, decide who's going to be doing them, make sure there's some training in place to teach people how to do those things, and that they practice them, that they've notified customers or suppliers of any changes to the existing processes, so that basically it all runs really smoothly. So that's that business readiness, if you like, the creation and the adoption of new ways of working. So whatever project I'm involved in, there's always those two streams of work. And it's only, of course, when we get to the end of that business readiness do we get the business value, the benefits being realised. So I've got to make sure that we're doing both of them. And I think one of the ways that I can sort of bring my audience from the business into what we're doing is to make sure that whenever we're writing user stories, can we make sure that we do both sides of the equation? So looking at the tangible work, if I'm going to put some kind of streamlined process in place, there might well be, you know, I might be automating steps, I might be pre-populating drop-down menus, so I might be doing an awful lot of developer work, coding work. That's great. That's my project team are delivering on it. That is fantastic. But I should also reflect on the fact that there are all of the work required to create the new ways of working need to be included just as much in the project. If I don't do that, then I'm underscoping my project by some considerable margin. I'm not honouring the contribution of those within the business, which of course is no way to build a one-team culture. It's a very simple thing, because what that means is that by including the new ways of working, the behavioural change work into the project and as user stories, then they automatically get included in some of the agile mechanisms we use for tracking our progress. For example, if I'm using Kanban, and I can actually collect all of this up and make sure that I'm showing how both the tangible and the behavioural work is moving through the Kanban board. If instead I'm using a product backlog or a prioritised requirements list, that both parts of the work are actually collected together. They're both recognised and they are both prioritised. So we're applying Moscow prioritisation, and then we're allocating resources to all of the work needed. Because I think one of the things we have to recognise is if we don't, then what we're doing is we're falling back into the old traditional project, which is, and I am going to go back again to this one here, which is that what happens is that, of course, too often in the more traditional projects, and I'm sure we've all been guilty of it, me included, we go away, we develop off the back of all the requirements and ideas, we throw it over the wall to those in the business and say, hey, it's ready for use, off you go. And we throw it over the wall at them, and then cause up absolute chaos as they scrabble around trying to put in place these new ways of working. And if we're not careful, if we don't use this concept of perhaps collecting via sort of epics and user stories the ways of working pieces of work alongside the more traditional sort of tangible project work, then we're guilty of doing exactly the same thing. But I think it's going to be worse because, of course, there's multiple of these go lives that we have to deal with in an agile environment. And very soon, and I've seen this quite a few times, and I've seen the anger from executives within the business who have just said, stop, just stop your project, just stop putting change into our current procedures. We've got customers to focus on. You're really impacting our service delivery levels. Just stop, go away. I don't care what you're up to. I just don't want to see anything from you guys for the next 6 months. We're having a quarantine period. So I've seen the impact when we don't knit these things together, and I wanted to avoid making those mistakes. So a very simple trick is just to reflect on what the scale of the work actually is. And finally, we started this webinar by talking about empathy, and I think it's helpful to sort of try to look through the lens of our stakeholders and to think through, what do they need? What are their concerns? What are the big impacts for them? And from that, actually perhaps address what's going on. So I thought I'd have a quick look at some of this. I'm actually sat outside and the wind's getting up, so I'm having to hold everything down now with my mug of tea, which is going to be quite interesting. So the sponsor, the finance director, department manager and team member. I thought I'd go through these. So from a sponsor perspective, obviously their key thing is that they want to achieve the strategic objective. And I think perhaps one of the most impactful things we can mention therefore is that in Agile, so the reassurance we can bring is that we use Moscow prioritization to ensure that everything we add to the solution, everything that we're delivering to them, is going to be adding the greatest possible value, that it's the must-haves that we'll deliver first. The must-haves are must-haves because they are directly connected to the achievement of benefits. They add the greatest value to what it is we do. I think something else that we can reflect on for sponsors is, of course, they do have this wider strategic responsibility. And so, of course, we are saying to them, you know, as far as the end goal is concerned, we are going to come back at regular touch points, whether we call that the end of every increment or iteration, but we will come back at regular touch points and work out, what does the current business environment look like? How has that changed from when we originated this project, and how can we reflect your changing needs back into what it is that we're doing? So I think that we can sort of reflect on the fact that perhaps our sponsors have this wider strategic objective and the end goals, so we need to connect with their needs. My finance directors, honestly, you know, it does tend to be all about the money, and they want to ensure that they're getting value for money. So I think that we do need to point out that, again, it's through that Moscow prioritization that we are delivering the most valuable as early as possible, and that also that they are going to get that early and indeed frequent return on investment. But if we don't make sure that we're bringing together the project deliverables and the new ways of working, then we can sort of torpedo that benefit very quickly, because of course what they're going to see is the productivity dips if we're not careful. So I think what we have to do is we have to recognize that they do want the early return on investment, but we need to make sure that that doesn't come at a significant cost to the business as usual metrics that they'll also be watching. Our department managers have to achieve business objectives, and they have a number of KPIs, as do their staff, that they are trying to maximise on. So I think, again, we need to recognise that that is what they are incentivised to deliver, and we need to say, look, how can we work most effectively together? We do need your regular input to help shape the project deliverables so that you get what you actually need, not what we think you need. but we also need to, I think one of the biggest things I see is that sometimes there is a complete misunderstanding on timings, and that the business don't appreciate that actually a daily catch up is really important to a lot of my project team members who just want to run by them a couple of questions, but that will keep them on track. And if they have to save everything up to only a weekly meeting, then of course there's an awful lot of sort of putting stuff on hold for a few days while we wait till we can access the business. So I think we need to sort of share that actually the sooner we can talk to you, the quicker we can get on with our work, but at the same time asking questions about how can we help you get ready for new ways of working. Would you like to sit beside us and we'll show you what we've done so far, so you get an early insight into how things might work practically? That will give you some ideas about how you might want to amend your processes. So I think there's an awful lot of humanity needed here when we're trying to sell the benefits and explain the benefits of the evolving solution and how Agile works. I think if we can just be empathetic, I think we can get on a lot better. But certainly that idea of recognizing that not only do I need the team members and department managers for their up-to-date sort of knowledge of how things should be working, but also that by my project team members can also give them early insight into what those deliverables are going to look like, so that they can already cast ahead and work out how they might be used. It could be a great symbiotic relationship. What I'm trying to always make sure of is that, you know, that there is real value to the business. Now, I've pulled together a sort of dependency network, you know, starting with the evolving solution and sort of looking at what all the benefits are. And if you get anything out of this webinar, maybe this is the one thing that you want to play with, is that perhaps start to have a think about how you can talk about the evolving solution and how Agile works in terms of benefits for those in your business. So perhaps, you know, not everything being delivered at once gives people an opportunity to amend what's coming up next. Not to everyone sort of involved all at once. Delivering the most valuable outcomes first, not wasting time on unnecessary changes. You know, there's early evidence of progress, not everything being delivered at once. You know, all of these things can in some way link together and ultimately lead us to the achievement of the strategic objectives, but also give us this feeling that there's a sort of environment here of positivity and a sense of achievement, of progress and motivation. So I'm a big fan of Agile, and I do want to take everybody with me. And I just wonder sometimes if we don't jump into our ways of working, our Agile approaches, without perhaps being a little bit empathetic to those who we affect the most. So maybe let's join together and make this the thing that we do going forward. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight. We've got an opportunity for some questions, and Estelle, if any of you have submitted questions as you've gone, what Estelle's going to do now is she's going to read some of those out. If there aren't any questions, then I can get on with my cup of tea, which is rapidly cooling. So off you go,
I'm
Estelle.
sorry, you can't go indoors just yet, Mel, because you've got rather a lot of questions. I'm sorry
Oh,
about
right.
that. We might be here till midnight. No, I'll try and tone it down. But that is Melanie Franklin, fueled by tea and demonstrating beautifully how to remain focused in a disruptive landscape. So thank you very much for that. Right. So some of them I think may have been asked just prior to you answering them. So we'll go through quite a few of these. So one that I didn't hear you address is, thanks for organising the webinar. What Agile methods can be used in the healthcare industry, like hospitals, general practice, GP, surgeries, and how do you introduce these methods, if any? Big question.
Well, at the moment, I am, and there's one Agile technique. I wouldn't say it's a method, it's a technique. And the one that I am absolutely focused on is Moscow prioritization. I have done lots of mini workshops in all sorts of healthcare areas at the moment. And what it is we're doing is we are practicing that ability to say, look, there's hundreds of things you need to be doing right now, but the skill is being able to just cut through those things and go, what of those things is going to deliver the most value? So we have to start with, let's be clear, what's our key objective? What's the thing that will make the greatest difference right now? And we need to therefore be able to navigate through all the things that we'd like to be doing that will have a longer term benefit. And we're rapidly going, forget everything else. What's the one thing? If I need to create enough capacity for testing, then what is it that I need to be doing? If I need to be creating enough capacity for dealing with those with coronavirus versus those with other long-term chronic but not acute conditions, what is it that I need to be doing? And so I think always it's that Moscow prioritization, and I have run lots of mini workshops where we are practicing that and actually making people feel less overwhelmed and more in control by being able to say, look, I've only got 12 hours of a working day, right? These are the things I can get done in these 12 hours. And then tomorrow I'll come back based on what I've achieved today. I'll have another go and pick out the next 2, 3 or 4 things that I need to be doing. So I think that's the most important thing at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you. And Jani has asked if there are any downsides related to high cost T&M, time and material.
Well, that's a big question. In terms of time and material contracts, I do think we do have quite a significant issue in the Agile world, in that if you've got a large supplier on a time and materials contract, where is their incentivization to help you prioritize and deliver the greatest value first? Actually, what they want is they want to stay on contract all of the time. So I think what we have to do is that is one of the big downsides, is that time and materials contract can act as a constraint. But I think even within that, if we explain that we are moving to a more agile approach, the time and materials contract is still there, but what we can shift them onto, again, it's prioritization. As if nothing else, I can't change the structure of the contract, but what I can do is get people focused on, within that contract, guys, we're working to an agile approach. So what I want you doing is focusing on these things first. I do not want you taking more of a waterfall approach to what you're doing. I actually want early achievements. So I think you have to work, there has to be, if you like, some goodwill in doing that. And that does rely on you building up some very strong interpersonal relationships, some very good stakeholder engagement to be able to do that.
Thank you. And I think that sort of segues into this one. And I think you've answered this, but just in case you want to reiterate, they're saying, hi, Melanie, this strategic non-tactical plan to convince the top management to fund a window of time that is full of unknowns is only possible if she absolutely trusts that in the end you'll deliver the desired benefits. How do you achieve this?
To be honest, and I've done it recently. I had to walk around my garden for an hour and a half with the chief executive recently. And do you know where we had the breakthrough? Where we had the breakthrough on getting permission, if you like, to be agile, I'm just going to go through the slides, guys, was this one here. Because what I managed to elicit from him was a real understanding, a real, appreciation of the fact that actually he wanted us to carve out that portion of time where we worked in a more agile way, because actually he didn't have all the answers. He didn't have all the certainty. So I said, look, surely the best thing, you can appoint me for the next year, if you like, and we can sit here for the next couple of months and try to define in detail every single thing I'm going to deliver for you in the next 12 months. But actually, number one, I think you want me making a difference much quicker than that. And number two, that's putting you into the position of having to predict the future in a great deal of detail. Why don't we use this more iterative approach, this more agile approach, and sort of say, look, these are the business conditions we understand right now. These are our key priorities we understand right now. There might be a pandemic, but we still need to restructure our business. We can't restructure everything. This happened to be about a target operating model. And I sort of said, but what we can do is we can do some tidying up on some of key processes that we feel are out of control. Let's do that first. and then let's put a pin in it in 3 months' time and come back, see where we are, and then maybe then we can start on some of the restructuring. But you try to do a massive restructuring and processes and metrics and KPIs all at the same time in one big bundle. I'm not sure you're going to get anywhere. But let's make a difference right now. And I created a sort of sense of urgency and a sense of real achievement with him. So what we've agreed is that we know what it is we're doing over the next sort of 12 weeks, and then we'll come back and revisit it. So I think that's the thing, is actually pointing out the reality, which is, if you're not careful, if you don't want to use this agile approach, CEO, then you're putting yourself in the position of having to say up front right now all the things that you want. And I don't think you're in the position to do that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Melanie. We have got a lot more questions. So if you don't mind, Melanie, I will email these to you afterwards, because there's some big questions here, and sadly we've run out of time. But
you can always get me on LinkedIn, guys. You know how to get hold of me. You just Google my name and I come up. Most of the time when you Google my name, I'm having quite a good hair day. So I do encourage that. So find me on LinkedIn, ask me questions, and I will find you resources to back up my answers. I will connect you with things, and I will quite happily do that over the weekend. So just get hold of me. I'm always here.
Fantastic, that's lovely. And just a reminder that we will be sending out the recording and slides. So that's the answer to another question. And another question is, yes, Melanie does do virtual training, so from her home in Spain. Thank
I've had
you
50 delegates through in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, we keep going. Keep our heads down, keep going. There's nothing worse in a crisis than looking back and going, gosh, I wish I'd done something useful. So let's keep our heads down and keep going, guys, eh?
You'll be pleased to know that we've had people from Spain, UK, Holland, South Africa, India, Brazil, Australia, Romania, Scotland, St. Lucia, Johannesburg on this call. Absolutely loads of people. So thanks very much.
Well, I think a bit of a shout out to the Australians then, because you're well into
yeah,
and I hope you had a beer while you were doing it, guys. Anyway, take care. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.